I pulled into my driveway just after 8 p.m., bone tired from the red-eye flight back from Vancouver. 2 weeks of sleeping upright in a hospital chair had worn me down. But my mind had never left home, not really. Not when Elaine was here alone. Elaine Lawson, my wife of 40 years, had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 61. Some days she was sharp and funny, teasing me about my terrible cooking. Other days she forgot where the silverware was kept or asked whether her mother, gone for 20 years, was coming over for dinner. But even on the hardest days, she always knew me, always felt safer when I was close. Leaving her had felt like ripping a piece out of myself. But my mother's stroke in Vancouver had forced my hand. Our daughter, Amanda, had volunteered to stay with Elaine. "Dad, don't worry," she'd promised. "I'll take care of Mom. Just focus on Grandma." I had believed her. God help me. When I stepped out of the car that night, the first thing that struck me was the dark. Our house was completely unlit. Elaine hated the dark. She always kept the living room lamp on until I got home. It was our small ritual, her way of telling me she was waiting. But tonight, nothing. I frowned and grabbed my suitcase from the trunk. The air felt heavier than usual. Cold in a way September nights shouldn't be. I climbed the steps to the front door, fishing for my keys. That's when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping, muffled, desperate. I froze. At first, I thought maybe a branch was hitting the siding, or something had fallen over inside the house. But as I stood still, holding my breath, the sound became clearer. Someone was banging on something. Weak, uneven, a human sound. My heart started pounding. I jammed the key into the lock and pushed the door open. The house was pitch black, the air stale. The thumping came again, louder now, and I could tell it was coming from below. The basement. "Elaine?" I called out. My voice echoed through the dark hallway. No answer. Just that hollow, frantic pounding. I rushed toward the basement door and stopped dead. A heavy steel padlock hung from the outside latch. We had never installed a lock like that. Not once in the 23 years we'd lived here. A wave of cold panic rolled through me. "Elaine," I yelled, grabbing the doorknob with both hands, shaking it uselessly. From the other side of the door came a sound I will never forget, a hoarse, trembling cry, my wife's voice, but cracked and dry, like she hadn't had water in days. "Rick," she whispered, "please." That was all it took. I sprinted into the garage, grabbed a crowbar, and slammed it against the padlock until the metal bent and snapped. The lock clattered to the floor. I threw the door open and flipped the light switch. The stench hit first. Urine, sweat, something sour and old. Then I saw her. Elaine was curled on the concrete at the bottom of the stairs, wearing the nightgown I'd laid out for her before I left, now torn and filthy. Her hair was matted, her skin pale as wax. Her lips cracked so badly they had bled. She looked like she had lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. She blinked at the sudden light, struggling to focus. "Rick," her voice was barely sound. Is it really you?" I was down those stairs before she finished the sentence. When I lifted her, she felt weightless, like a child. Or like someone who hadn't eaten. "It's me, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm here. I've got you." Her fingers twitched against my chest. A feeble attempt to hold on. I carried her upstairs, laid her gently on the couch, and grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I dialed 911, stumbling over my words as I gave our address. As I spoke, I noticed things I hadn't before. The coffee table was moved. Boxes I'd never seen were stacked against the wall. Elaine's daily pill organizer, the one Amanda was supposed to fill every morning, was gone. Something was terribly wrong. When the paramedics arrived, they moved fast. One checked her pulse and blood pressure, another examined her eyes. Her hands, the bruises on her knees. "Sir," one of them asked, "when did you last see your wife?" 2 weeks ago, I said. I left her with my daughter, Amanda. She told me she'd take care of everything. The paramedic exchanged a look with his partner. A look that told me more than any words could. They lifted Elaine onto the stretcher. I climbed into the ambulance beside her, taking her cold hand in mine. She tried to speak, but only a weak breath came out. I stroked her hair and kept whispering. You're safe now, Elaine. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so damn sorry. At St. Michael's Hospital, doctors rushed her into an exam room. After a few agonizing minutes in the hallway, a nurse pulled me aside. Mr. Lawson, she said gently, your wife is severely dehydrated, malnourished. She has early signs of hypothermia. If she was in that basement for the full 2 weeks. She hesitated. She's lucky to be alive. I felt my stomach twist. Before I could process her words, a man in a gray suit walked toward me and flashed a badge. Detective Andrew Miles, he said, Toronto Police, Elder Abuse Unit. I need to ask you a few questions. I sat with him in the waiting room while doctors worked on Elaine. I told him everything, my mother's stroke, Amanda's promises, the daily calls during the first week, then the sudden silence, the texts, the excuses. Finally, when I finished, Detective Miles closed his notebook and looked at me carefully. Mr. Lawson, he said, during the time you were away, did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs? The question blindsided me. No, I said, absolutely not. His jaw tightened. Then, sir, this situation may be far more serious than neglect. I stared at him, numb, as the truth began clawing its way into my chest. Something terrible had happened in my home. And my daughter might be at the center of it. I went home the next afternoon while Elaine slept under warm blankets in her hospital room. Hooked up to fluids, drifting in and out. I needed answers, real answers, and I knew they had to be inside that house. The moment I stepped through the door, the silence felt different, not empty, but violated, like someone had lived here without any respect for the home Elaine and I had built. I walked slowly through the living room, noticing more details I had missed in the panic of the night before. A dining chair was out of place, angled toward the hallway like someone had sat there listening. A stack of cardboard boxes sat on the floor, Amazon boxes. But unopened. A throw blanket that Elaine loved, normally folded neatly on the couch, was balled up on the floor like someone used it carelessly. My stomach tightened. I moved through the house room by room, looking for anything unusual. In the kitchen, the pill organizer Elaine used daily was nowhere to be found. She couldn't go more than a few hours without her medication schedule being thrown off. Amanda knew that. She had helped me manage it for the past year. Where the hell was it? I opened drawers, cabinets, even checked the trash. Nothing. I felt the uneasy prickle of fear creeping higher up my spine. Then I saw it, Amanda's laptop sitting on the kitchen table. She never left her laptop anywhere unattended. She guarded it like a vault. But there it was, screen closed but charger still plugged into the outlet. I shouldn't have touched it. Even as my hand reached out. I knew it, but something inside me, some instinct I couldn't ignore, told me the truth was in there. The lid lifted with a soft click. The screen lit up. There was no password. It opened straight to her desktop. My heart sank. Either she left in a hurry, or she didn't care what I found. I moved the cursor with shaking fingers. Folders lined the desktop, some with boring names like work docs. Others with more suspicious titles like estate papers, signatures, and one that chilled me instantly. Thornhill Capital Management. I clicked the folder labeled estate papers. Inside were scans of documents, stacks of them. My name, Elaine's name, banking statements, account numbers, withdrawals. My breath caught when I saw a file titled POA_Lawson.pdf. Power of attorney. I opened it. My wife's signature stared back at me. Except, it wasn't quite right. It was her handwriting, yes, but shaky, uneven, like she was confused, or frightened, or being told to sign something she didn't understand. Elaine couldn't read long documents anymore. She could barely follow a simple form. She would have signed anything placed in front of her, if she thought it was something I needed her to do. My hands started to tremble. I kept scrolling. Bank transfers, withdrawals, a line of credit, no. A home equity loan, taken out against our fully paid off house. $100,000. $60,000 gone from our savings. Another 15 from our emergency account. Transfers totaling $175. All of it moved into a business account belonging to Thornhill Capital. I clicked on the Thornhill folder. More files opened, business registration forms, a website mock-up, emails. And then I saw the registered owner. Brandon Tate. My son-in-law. The man who always bragged about cryptocurrency, NFTs, passive income. The man who could never explain how he made money but somehow always talked about investors. The man I never trusted. He'd created a corporation 6 months ago. And Amanda, she had helped him. I opened their messages, her iMessage account was synced. My vision blurred as I read the conversation. Brandon. She keeps crying for her dad. This isn't going to work. Amanda. She'll forget. Give it another day. Brandon. What if someone checks? Amanda. Who? Dad's in Vancouver. Mom doesn't have friends visiting anymore. We're fine. My throat closed. They had locked Elaine in the basement. On purpose. To silence her. To keep her from talking to me. To buy time while they drained our accounts. They planned it. They planned all of it. My knees nearly buckled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't comprehend how my daughter, my own daughter, could write those words. Could dismiss her mother's suffering so casually. I don't remember pulling out my phone. But suddenly it was in my hand. I called Detective Miles. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Lawson? I found something. I choked out. You need to come to the house. Now. He arrived within an hour with 2 other officers. I showed them everything, every file, every email, every scanned document. I took them to the basement. I showed them the bucket, the blanket, the scratches on the wall where Elaine must have tried to claw her way out. Detective Miles's face hardened. This is no longer just elder neglect. He said quietly, this is unlawful confinement, financial exploitation, fraud. We'll get warrants. And we'll find them. Them. Amanda and Brandon. My daughter and her husband. While the officers researched their address, one of them asked if I had their current location. They live in Liberty Village. I said numbly, condo on East Liberty Street. Officers were dispatched immediately. I stayed behind with Detective Miles. Not 15 minutes later, his radio crackled. They're not here, a voice said. Place looks cleared out. I felt something cold grip my spine. Then the officer added. But we found something in the trash. Looks like airline documents. One-way tickets. Lisbon, Portugal. Portugal. A country with no extradition treaty for financial crimes. They were running. They were willing to leave Elaine to die, take the money, and vanish. Detective Miles turned to me. Mr. Lawson, your early return likely saved your wife's life. Those words hit me harder than anything else that day. Because in that moment, I realized. If I'd stayed in Vancouver for the full 2 weeks, Elaine might have died in that dark basement. And my daughter would have walked away without a single tear. Elaine stayed in the hospital for 3 days. The doctors worked around the clock to rehydrate her, stabilize her body temperature, and treat the malnutrition. They spoke gently when they explained things to me. But nothing could soften the truth she had been starved, deprived of water, left in darkness long enough for her body to start shutting down. Every hour, Elaine would open her eyes and ask the same question in a trembling voice. Where's Amanda? Is Amanda coming today? Each time, I felt something inside me crack. How could I tell her the truth? That our daughter, the same girl Elaine used to braid hair for before school, the same girl she read bedtime stories to, had locked her in a basement like she was nothing? So every time Elaine asked, I lied. She's busy right now, sweetheart, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She would nod faintly, then drift off again. On the second day, while she slept, I went home again. I wasn't ready, but I couldn't just sit in a hospital chair waiting for someone else to piece my life back together. I had to keep going. Walking into the basement a second time was somehow worse than the first. In the cold fluorescent light, everything felt smaller, sharper. The bucket in the corner, the thin blanket, the indent on the concrete floor where she had been lying. The removed light bulb socket overhead, deliberately unscrewed. I imagined Elaine in the dark, confused and frightened, calling out for me. I imagined her trying to stand, trying to reach the stairs, but too weak to climb. I had to sit down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. After a long moment, I forced myself upstairs. I needed to look through the rest of the house more carefully, even though part of me didn't want to see what else Amanda had done. I checked the guest room. Empty. The bedspread was crumpled as if someone had slept there recently. The closet hung open, and inside were 2 wire hangers, nothing else. Amanda had packed. In the hallway, I noticed the framed family portrait from years ago, Elaine holding Amanda as a toddler. Me standing beside them, all 3 of us smiling in a park. The frame was reversed, turned face down on the table as though someone couldn't bear to look at it. Or didn't care. I found myself gripping the edge of the table, fighting the urge to smash the frame against the wall. Rage rolled through me, thick, suffocating, unfamiliar. I had never felt anything like this before. I wasn't just angry. I was betrayed. My own daughter had done this. Amanda, my baby girl, the child Elaine and I saved money for so she could go to college. The girl we helped buy her first car. The girl who used to call me, Daddy, long after she was old enough to switch to, Dad. And she had thrown all of that away because her greedy husband convinced her they could make easy money. Or worse, because she wanted it too. I left the house and drove straight to the police station. I didn't want to think anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know what was coming next. Detective Andrew Miles came out to meet me almost immediately. Mr. Lawson, he said, guiding me into a small interview room. We've finished going through the documents from your home. I sat down, bracing myself without realizing it. He opened a folder and slid copies of the documents across the table. I stared at the numbers, withdrawals totaling $75. A home equity loan of $100 against the house Elaine and I had paid off 20 years ago. The transfers to Thornhill Capital. The forged POA. This wasn't impulsive, Detective Miles said. Your daughter and son-in-law planned this. They picked a notary in Scarborough known for avoiding too many questions. They exploited your wife's cognitive impairment. They used your absence. This was calculated. He paused, then asked quietly. Did you know your daughter had this level of access to your finances? I shook my head. No, we had shared information, but I never gave her legal authority. I trusted her to help with her mother when I couldn't be there. That's all. He nodded slowly. I have to be honest with you, Mr. Lawson. This is one of the more egregious elder abuse cases I've seen. The confinement alone is enough for felony charges. Combined with the financial exploitation, the fraud. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Before I could respond, an officer knocked on the door and spoke quietly to him. Detective Miles returned with a grim expression. We located your daughter and son-in-law, he said, or at least, we know where they were. They cleared out their condo, took clothes, electronics, personal items. He slid another document across the table, a printed email. Property rental inquiry. The subject line read, Lisbon, Portugal. 6-month lease. They really had planned everything. Flight is in 2 days. Miles continued. One way. They were counting on you being gone longer. Gone longer? I whispered. He met my eyes. If you hadn't returned early, Mr. Lawson, your wife might not have survived. My breath stalled in my chest. The idea that Elaine, gentle, patient, trusting Elaine, could have died alone on a cold concrete floor while our daughter walked away into a sunny new life in Portugal, it hollowed me out. Detective Miles stood. We've issued warrants, he said. Amanda Lawson and Brandon Tate are now officially wanted. We'll coordinate with airport authorities and border services. We'll find them. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Firm but sympathetic. I'm sorry you're going through this. But we're going to get justice for your wife. Justice. The word echoed in my mind. Heavy, bitter, necessary. On the drive back to the hospital, I kept thinking about one thing: the look on Elaine's face when she saw me at the bottom of those basement stairs. The mix of confusion and relief. The way she whispered my name like she wasn't sure I was real. She had been waiting for me. She had been calling for me. And Amanda had left her there to die. When I walked into Elaine's hospital room, she looked up, her eyes glassy but warm. "Rick," she murmured, "did Amanda call? I miss her." I swallowed hard. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, sitting beside her, "but I'm here, and I won't let anything happen to you ever again." 2 days later, just past noon, my phone rang while I sat beside Elaine's hospital bed, rubbing gentle circles across the back of her hand. She was half awake, drifting in and out, murmuring occasional fragments of memories, most of them from years ago. Childhood summers, family barbecues, Amanda's first piano recital, moments untouched by the disease slowly stealing pieces of her mind. When the phone vibrated in my pocket, I stepped into the hallway before answering. It was Detective Miles. "Mr. Lawson," he said without preamble, "we've located them." My throat tightened. "Where?" "At Pearson Airport. They just tried to board a flight to London. From there, they had a connection to Lisbon." I closed my eyes. The relief wasn't satisfying. It wasn't even comforting. It was a heavy, exhausted exhale, like the first breath after being held underwater too long. "Are they in custody?" I asked. "Yes, both of them." I didn't ask for details. I didn't ask how they reacted. I didn't need to know whether Amanda cried, or panicked, or begged. I didn't want to imagine it, not yet. Not when Elaine was lying a few feet away, her hands still trembling from trauma my daughter had inflicted. "Thank you," I finally said. "We'll keep you updated," he replied. "The Crown will be in touch soon." After I hung up, I leaned against the cold hospital wall and let myself breathe. Not fully, just enough to stay upright. Elaine called out faintly from inside the room. "Rick," and I went back in. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "Did Amanda say she's coming?" she asked. I swallowed the burn in my throat. "Not today, sweetheart, but I'm here." I sat with her until she drifted back to sleep, stroking her forehead gently as she exhaled. That evening, the media got wind of the arrest. I didn't know how. Maybe someone at the airport. Maybe a leaked police report. But within hours, my phone vibrated nonstop, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails from reporters, text messages from coworkers I hadn't spoken to since retirement. "Is it true? Was your daughter really involved? Are you willing to comment on the case?" I turned the phone off. None of it mattered. Only Elaine mattered. By the next morning, the Crown attorney assigned to the case reached out. Her name was Laura Bennett, and she spoke with the kind of crisp clarity that comes from years of experience dealing with the worst humanity has to offer. "Mr. Lawson," she began, "first, I'm very sorry for what you and your wife have gone through." I thanked her quietly. "I've reviewed the evidence," she continued. "This is one of the strongest elder abuse cases we've had in years. The financial exploitation alone, combined with the confinement, carries severe penalties." "What kind of penalties?" I asked. "For Amanda? Realistically, 8 to 12 years. For Brandon, because of the fraudulent fund he operated, anywhere from 10 to 15. The numbers hit me like blunt instruments. My daughter, the child I raised, facing more than a decade in prison. Her husband even more. I didn't respond immediately. "Mr. Lawson," Bennett said gently, "I understand this is difficult. But what they did, it wasn't accidental. It was calculated. Your wife could have died." "I know," I whispered. "And you deserve justice for that." Justice. The word felt heavy again. Heavy, but necessary. Before we ended the call, Bennett said something that stayed with me. "Even if they apologize later, remember this, they didn't stop until they were caught." That truth carved itself into me like a chisel. A few days later, the bail hearing took place. I didn't want to go, but Detective Miles suggested I should. "It's good for the court to see a victim's family present," he said. So I went. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Amanda and Brandon sat in the prisoner's box in orange jumpsuits. Brandon stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Amanda looked around until her eyes landed on me. Her face crumpled. "Dad," she whispered, though the glass barrier between us muted her voice. I didn't move. Her attorney argued for supervised release. Claimed Amanda had no criminal history. Claimed she was remorseful. Claimed she was under the influence of her husband's schemes. The Crown countered with the evidence, the texts, the POA, the withdrawal trails, the basement, the attempt to flee. The judge listened patiently before delivering the ruling. Bail denied. Amanda cried. Real tears. She pressed a hand to the glass as if I might reach out in return. I didn't. I stood up and walked out of the room without looking back. The moment the courtroom doors closed behind me, I leaned against the wall and felt something shatter inside my chest. Not guilt, not regret, just a profound grief for the daughter I thought I had. That evening, after the hearing, I met with a civil attorney, Daniel Porter, a seasoned elder law specialist recommended by the hospital's social worker. He listened carefully as I recounted everything, then nodded slowly. Mr. Lawson, you have more than enough grounds for a civil suit, he said. Financial exploitation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty. You should sue for not only the stolen funds but also damages for what your wife endured. How much? I asked. At minimum, the $175 they stole, plus additional damages, perhaps another $200. Even if they can't pay now, a judgment will follow them for life. He looked at me over his glasses. They took everything from your wife. You have every right to take everything the law allows from them. I nodded slowly. I'll do it, I said. File whatever needs to be filed. When I returned to the hospital that night, Elaine was sitting up in bed, staring at the empty visitor's chair beside her. Rick, she said softly, did Amanda come by today? I pulled the chair closer, sat down, and took her hand. No, sweetheart, I murmured, but I'm here. I'm always here. She smiled faintly, leaning her head toward me. Good, she whispered. I didn't want to be alone again. The weight of those words settled in my chest like a stone. I'll never let that happen, I promised, my voice breaking as I kissed her forehead. The months that followed were a blur of hospital visits, legal calls, paperwork, and nights where sleep never truly came. Every day had the same rhythm: Elaine's slow recovery, meetings with attorneys, and a growing stack of bills on the kitchen counter that I forced myself to ignore until after she was asleep. Alzheimer's doesn't wait for life to settle down. It doesn't pause for trials or police investigations. Trauma accelerates decline, the neurologist told me gently, and I could already see it happening. Elaine began forgetting small things first: where we were, what day it was, what she ate for lunch. Then she started forgetting conversations minutes after they happened. And some nights she would wake up terrified, asking if she was back in the dark basement again. Each time, I held her until her breathing steadied. I won't let anything happen to you, I whispered each night, even though deep down I feared I had already failed her in the worst way. The day after Amanda's bail hearing, Attorney Porter filed the civil suit, Lawson versus Lawson and Tate. The papers stated the facts in language clinical enough to make it sound unreal. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Conversion. Breach of fiduciary duty. The total damages sought $375. I stared at the number for a long time. It felt enormous, and yet, it didn't come close to what they had taken from us. Porter also advised me to file a formal complaint with the State Accountancy Board regarding Amanda's CPA license. It felt surreal, reporting my own daughter to her professional board, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had used her credentials to give legitimacy to Brandon's fraudulent fund. She had misrepresented investment materials. She had recruited 2 co-workers. There was no defending it. Within a month, the board suspended her license pending the criminal outcome. One more door closed behind her. But that didn't bring the money back. The bank expected payments on the home equity line of credit. Our savings were gone. Medical bills piled higher. I took out a small loan against my pension and hired a full-time caregiver to help Elaine during the hours I had to meet with attorneys, police, and financial institutions. Each night, I sat at the dining table and calculated how long I could keep us afloat. I realized with a sharp ache that the house we had paid off, our sanctuary for 20 years, might eventually have to be sold so Elaine could receive the memory care she'd need. The thought gutted me. But I didn't tell Elaine. She had suffered enough. One morning in early January, 5 months after finding Elaine in the basement, Detective Miles called. "The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week," he said. "The Crown would like you present." "I'll be there," I said. The courtroom felt different this time. Quieter, heavier. Amanda walked in first, wearing the same orange jumpsuit. She looked thinner, her face drawn and her hair tied back tightly. She scanned the room until she found me, but I refused to meet her eyes. Brandon entered next, escorted by 2 officers. He no longer had the swagger he always carried, no forced confidence. No crypto guru grin. His face was pale, nervous. The Crown Attorney, Laura Bennett, presented the evidence: the forged power of attorney, the bank records, the text messages. She described each one clearly, letting the weight of the facts settle into the room. When she played the police video of the basement, the bucket, the thin blanket, the removed light bulb, several people in the courtroom looked away. Even the judge paused before continuing, her expression tightening. Amanda's attorney tried to argue that she had been manipulated by Brandon, that she was overwhelmed, that she suffered from anxiety. But when Bennett stood up for cross-examination, her voice cut through the courtroom like a scalpel. "Ms. Lawson," she said, holding up one of the printed messages. "This is your text, correct? She'll forget. Give it another day." Amanda's voice cracked. I didn't mean." "What exactly didn't you mean?" Bennett pressed. "You were referring to your mother." Amanda's shoulders collapsed. The judge was unmoved. "Ms. Lawson, you are an educated accountant," the judge said firmly. "You understood exactly what you were doing. The case was bound over for trial." Amanda sobbed. Brandon stared at the table. I felt nothing, just numbness, a heavy, hollow numbness that settled deep in my bones. After the hearing, Bennett met with me privately. "There's something you should know," she said. "Brandon's attorney is considering a plea deal. He may be willing to testify against Amanda in exchange for a reduced sentence." My blood went cold. "He would turn on her?" I asked. She nodded. "He's facing additional fraud charges unrelated to your case, 30 victims. All elderly or vulnerable. If he testifies fully and honestly, we can build an airtight case against Amanda." "And what would he get in return?" 8 years, she said, eligible for parole after serving 2/3. "And Amanda? With his testimony? A strong push for the maximum, 12 years. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I heard Elaine's voice again, soft, scared, asking if Amanda was coming. I remembered the basement, the cold, the bruises, the hunger. I remembered what they had taken from us. Justice wasn't revenge. It wasn't satisfaction. It was simply the only thing left that made sense. "Take the deal," I said quietly. Bennett nodded. 2 weeks later, Brandon pleaded guilty to all charges. He stood in court and read a statement, clearly written by his lawyer, expressing remorse. The judge didn't soften at all. 8 years in federal prison, she ruled, no chance of early conditional release. As he was led away, Brandon didn't look at Amanda once. She stared after him, her face crumpling as she realized he had chosen himself over her. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel anything. That night, when I returned home, Elaine was sitting in the recliner with her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at me with soft, confused eyes. "Rick," she whispered, "have you talked to Amanda? I'm worried about her." I sat down beside her and took her hand. "No, sweetheart," I said gently, "but I'm here, and that's what matters." She leaned her head on my shoulder, trusting me completely. And I vowed, for the 1000th time, never to fail her again. Jennifer's, Amanda's, trial began in early June. 8 months had passed since the night I found Elaine in the basement. 8 months of hospitals, depositions, therapy sessions, and slow, painful recovery. 8 months of watching my wife slip further into the fog of Alzheimer's while our daughter sat in jail. waiting for her day in court. The courthouse smelled of old paper and disinfectant, a scent that clung to the walls like ghosts of cases past. I walked in with Detective Miles beside me and took my seat at the back of the courtroom. I didn't want to sit closer. I didn't want to feel anything the moment Amanda walked through those doors. But when she did, a part of me cracked anyway. She looked small, thinner than before, her hair tied back, her face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. She glanced around until she found me. A flicker of hope crossed her face, as if she thought I might smile. Forgive, something. I didn't move. She looked away. The Crown Attorney, Laura Bennett, opened the trial with a firm, steady voice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about a misunderstanding. It's not about a family dispute. It is about deliberate exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It is about unlawful confinement. It is about a daughter who chose greed over her own mother's life. The jury watched her intently. Bennett continued, outlining the timeline: the forged power of attorney, the financial transfers, the forced confinement. Then she paused, letting the silence sink in. Elaine Lawson spent 14 days in a dark basement. She said quietly, no food, no water, no medication, no light. If her husband hadn't returned early, she would have died. The room felt colder. The Crown's case unfolded piece by piece. Bank statements, the HELOC documents, text messages printed and enlarged on courtroom boards, the scanned POA, the video footage from the police walkthrough of the basement. When the jurors saw the bucket, the blanket, the removed light bulb, at least 3 of them wiped their eyes. Amanda shifted in her seat, shaking her head slightly, whispering to her attorney. Panic flickered across her face. But the worst moment was still ahead. They called Elaine to the stand. I didn't want her to testify. Her neurologist didn't want her to testify. But Bennett insisted the jury needed to see the human toll, the real victim behind the documents. And so, with the help of a social worker, Elaine slowly made her way to the witness stand. She looked frail, confused, lost in the oversized wooden structure. She was sworn in. Then Bennett approached. Mrs. Lawson, she said gently, do you remember being in the basement? Elaine looked at her hands for a moment. I was scared, she whispered. It was dark. I kept calling for Rick. Do you remember how long you were there? Elaine blinked slowly, as if trying to pull the memory through thick fog. I don't know, she said finally. A long time. And do you remember who was with you before your husband left for Vancouver? Elaine hesitated, then, with a trembling voice. Amanda, my daughter, she said she would take care of me. Amanda broke down sobbing at the defense table. Mrs. Lawson, Bennett continued gently, do you know why you were locked in the basement? Elaine's eyes filled with tears. I kept calling for my husband. She whispered, I thought they forgot me. I thought maybe I did something wrong. The jury watched her with a mix of heartbreak and anger. Amanda's lawyer tried to cross-examine, but it fell apart immediately. Elaine's confusion made it impossible for her to answer complex questions. After 3 or 4 failed attempts, the judge stopped the cross-examination entirely. Elaine was escorted back to the hallway, where I met her and held her as she sobbed softly. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't remember most of what she'd said. But the damage, to the jury, to the defense, was done. The next witness was Brandon. He walked in wearing a prison jumpsuit, hands cuffed, escorted by 2 guards. He didn't look at Amanda. Not once. He sat down, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then he inhaled deeply and did something I wasn't prepared for. He talked. He told the jury everything. How Amanda pitched the idea. How she researched power of attorney laws. How she found a notary known for overlooking red flags. How she planned the timeline around my flight. How she instructed him to lock Elaine in the basement so she couldn't answer the phone. She said her mom would forget. Brandon testified that the Alzheimer's made it easier. That no one would know. Amanda covered her face with her hands and cried so hard her shoulders shook. Her lawyer tried to paint Brandon as a liar. Someone cutting a deal to save himself. But the documents on Amanda's laptop matched his story. The text messages matched his story. The bank transfers matched his story. And then came the fatal blow. Bennett pulled up the browser history from Amanda's laptop. Dozens of searches. Weeks before my mother's stroke. Power of attorney exploitation. How to obtain POA from Alzheimer's parent. Countries without extradition for financial crimes. Portugal elder fraud extradition. The jury looked stunned. Amanda sat frozen, eyes vacant, as if she'd finally realized the full weight of everything collapsing around her. Her attorney had no defense left. When Amanda took the stand in her own defense, it was a disaster. She rambled, she contradicted herself, she cried, she begged, she blamed Brandon, she blamed stress, she blamed confusion. But the moment Bennett read aloud the text, "She'll forget, give it another day," Amanda broke entirely. "I didn't mean it," she choked out. "I didn't mean it, I didn't." But it was too late. The truth was carved into those messages. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. All of them. When the judge read the verdict, Amanda collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands. She looked back at me through tears, mouthing something, "Dad, please, Dad, I'm sorry." I stood still. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Because in that moment, I finally understood something. Forgiveness might come someday. But consequences came first. 2 months after the guilty verdict, we gathered again in the same courtroom, this time for sentencing. The atmosphere felt heavier than before, quieter, as if everyone understood the gravity of what was about to happen. I sat in the front row. Elaine wasn't well enough to come. Her neurologist said the stress might worsen her decline. So I went alone, carrying the weight of both our voices. Amanda shuffled into the courtroom in her jumpsuit, wrists chained loosely in front of her. She looked older, tired, as if the months in jail had pulled the youth straight out of her. She glanced at me only once, eyes swollen from crying, before staring down at her lap. When the judge called the court to order, I felt my heart pound with a strange mixture of dread and certainty. No matter what happened today, none of us would walk out unchanged. The prosecutor, Laura Bennett, stood first. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is one of the most severe instances of elder abuse and financial exploitation we have seen in recent years. The victim, Mrs. Elaine Lawson, is a vulnerable adult with early-onset Alzheimer's, a condition requiring constant supervision and compassion. Instead, she was left locked in a basement for 14 days, without food, water, light, or medication, a confinement that, had her husband not returned early, would have resulted in her death." Bennett's voice didn't waver. Amanda Lawson used her mother's condition for personal gain. She manipulated legal systems, forged documents, and coordinated a financial theft totaling nearly $200. The level of premeditation is staggering. Google searches, notary appointments, withdrawal planning, airline tickets, and a concrete plan to escape the country afterward. She paused, then added quietly, "The Crown seeks the maximum penalty of 12 years. Amanda's attorney rose next and tried, once again, to paint her as overwhelmed. Influenced by Brandon, emotionally unstable. He argued she never intended to cause her mother physical harm, that she panicked, that she was remorseful. But the judge looked unconvinced. Then it was my turn. I stood, holding the statement I had written during long nights at the dining table while Elaine slept. As I walked to the podium, my hands trembled, not from fear, those days were long gone, but from the weight of everything the last year had taken from us. I began reading. "Your Honor, my wife Elaine is not the same woman she was 8 months ago. She used to light up when our daughter walked through the door. She used to brag about Amanda's promotions, her career, her accomplishments. Now, she wakes up some mornings so confused that she asks if Amanda is still in high school. Other mornings, she cries, asking why her daughter won't visit." My voice cracked, but I forced myself to continue. "And then there are the nights. Nights when she wakes up terrified, calling out for me because she thinks she's locked in the darkness again. Nights when she can't remember where she is, or who I am, or why her body hurts. Alzheimer's is taking her from me one day at a time, But what Amanda did sped that process up. Trauma accelerates decline. We live with that reality every single day. I swallowed, glancing briefly toward my daughter. I have lost more than money. I have lost the family I thought I had. And Elaine has lost her sense of safety, a sense she may never get back. I placed the papers down. Then I said something I hadn't written. Your Honor, I don't hate my daughter. But I no longer recognize her. And whatever sentence you give today, I hope it reminds her, and everyone listening, that trust is sacred. And once broken, it can destroy families. I stepped back, unable to look at Amanda. The neurologist submitted a letter, detailing how trauma had worsened Elaine's condition, accelerating her cognitive decline. The judge read it slowly, her expression growing more somber with every paragraph. Then she spoke. Ms. Lawson, please rise. Amanda pushed herself up, trembling. You are an educated woman, a certified public accountant. You understood exactly what you were doing when you manipulated legal documents. When you obtained a fraudulent power of attorney, and when you confined your mother to a basement. Alzheimer's does not make someone disposable. Vulnerability does not give family permission to exploit. Amanda's chin quivered. She was crying before the judge finished. There are no mitigating factors. Only choices, each one deliberate, each one calculated, each one cruel. The judge paused. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison. A sound escaped Amanda, a broken sob. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the defendant's table to stay upright. When the guards approached, she turned toward me. Dad, please? I'm so sorry, Dad, please. But I remained still. Because forgiveness needed time. And consequences had to come first. As they guided her out of the courtroom, her cries echoed off the walls. For a fraction of a second, I felt a flash of the father I used to be, the man who once picked her up when she fell. Who once read her fairy tales. Who once promised he'd always protect her. But then I remembered Elaine. I remembered the basement. And the feeling vanished. The civil suit concluded soon after. Amanda and Brandon were found jointly liable for $375 in damages. It was a hollow victory. They had no assets left. Nothing to seize, nothing to repay. The restitution order stood, but collecting it would likely take a lifetime, if it ever came at all. And the financial hole they left behind was deeper than I ever imagined. We refinanced the HELOC into our mortgage. For the first time in 20 years. I had monthly payments hanging over our heads. The caregiver costs, Elaine's medications, transportation to medical appointments, the modifications needed to make the house safe for her condition. Every time I sat down to pay bills, I felt the weight of their choices pressing on my chest. Still, despite everything, I knew one thing. We were alive. Elaine was safe. And nothing, not money, not betrayal, not guilt, was more important than that. Life after the sentencing was quieter, at least on the surface. But inside our home, inside our routines, the damage Amanda caused echoed through everything. Elaine came home a few weeks after the hearing. She was physically stronger, but mentally, it was as if pieces of her had drifted away and never returned. Some mornings she remembered me perfectly, my name, our house, our marriage. Other mornings, she looked at me with puzzled eyes, as if I were a kind stranger helping her get dressed. And then there were the hard mornings. The ones where she'd ask, Rick, why won't Amanda visit? Did I make her mad? Each time, it felt like a fresh wound opening inside my chest. I never told her the truth. Her neurologist said it wouldn't help. She'd forget by the next day and feel the pain all over again. So I stuck to the gentler version. She's away for work, sweetheart, but I'm here. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes she nodded and moved on. And sometimes she cried quietly, unable to understand the ache she felt but unable to forget it either. One evening, as I was helping her brush her hair, she paused and stared at herself in the mirror. I feel different, she whispered, like someone took something from me. I didn't know how to respond, so I placed my hand on her shoulder and hoped she could feel my love through the fog. But Alzheimer's kept moving, kept taking. She began wandering at night, once ending up outside on the porch at 2 a.m., shivering in the cold. I bought alarms for the doors, child-proof locks for the cabinets, railings for the bathroom. I learned how to help her shower safely, how to keep her calm during episodes of sundowning, how to redirect her when she became frightened. I learned how to grieve slowly, one forgotten memory at a time. By spring, it became clear I needed more help. Our caregiver, Marlene, increased her hours. I hired a nurse twice a week. The bills grew like vines, creeping across the dining table and into every corner of our life. But Elaine always came first. Every penny I had, every hour I could give, it all went to her. The civil judgment sat in a folder inside my desk drawer, almost mocking in its formality. The $375 Amanda and Brandon owed us wasn't going to appear. Their bank accounts were empty. Their few assets were confiscated to repay Brandon's other victims, people far worse off than us. Some days I let myself imagine what would have happened if I hadn't come home early. If the flight hadn't changed. If I'd stayed in Vancouver the full 2 weeks. Elaine alone on that concrete floor. The house empty. The flight to Portugal already gone. I tried not to think about it, but sometimes I had to step outside, sit on the back porch, and let the evening air steady me. One afternoon in late fall, Detective Miles called again. I wanted to update you, he said. Brandon was transferred to Joyceville. Medium security. His earliest parole eligibility will be in 5 years. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. And Amanda? She's been moved to Grand Valley Institution for Women, he said, eligible for parole in 8 years. 8 years. Elaine might not even remember her own name by then. She won't call you, Detective Miles added gently. She won't be allowed to. Not unless you put yourself on the approved contact list. But, based on everything, I wasn't sure you wanted that. I don't, I replied quietly. I ended the call and stood in the kitchen, staring at the floor. 8 years. It sounded long. It sounded short. It sounded impossible. Later that night, I sat beside Elaine as she watched a baseball game on TV. She didn't remember the players, but she liked the colors of their uniforms. She held my hand loosely in her lap, like a habit her mind didn't quite understand but her heart still remembered. Rick? She asked softly. Yes, sweetheart? Do we have children? The question stabbed deeper than anything else had. Yes, I said after a long moment. We do. Do they visit? I paused. Then I chose the only truth she could hold without breaking. They're far away, I whispered, but they know we love them. She nodded slowly, accepting that as enough. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed. I like when you're here, she murmured. I'm always here, I promised. And I meant it, every word, because the time we had left, however long or short, was all we had now. Alzheimer's didn't bargain. It didn't wait. It didn't care about trials or money or justice. It stole quietly, silently. But so did love. My love for Elaine didn't shout or demand. It just stayed, steady, constant, a quiet rebellion against everything life had taken from her. A few weeks later, I drove past the old courthouse on an errand and saw a group of reporters standing on the steps, filming some other case, some other crime, and it struck me how our story, our nightmare, had already faded from the headlines. The city had moved on. The world had moved on. But we hadn't. We lived with the aftermath every day. One night, near Christmas, Elaine sat up suddenly in bed and stared at me with clear eyes, crystal clear. Like before the disease. Rick, she whispered, thank you for finding me. My breath caught. She remembered. Not everything, not the whole ordeal, but she remembered enough. I kissed her forehead, my voice thick. I'll always find you, sweetheart. Her eyes softened, and for a moment I had my wife back, the full version of her. Untouched by fear or disease. Then, slowly, the fog returned. She blinked, confused again, and asked, who are you? It felt like my heart cracked in two. But I smiled softly, took her hands, and said, I'm someone who loves you very much. She seemed comforted by that. She lay back down, closing her eyes, trusting me completely. I sat awake beside her long after she fell asleep, listening to the quiet hum of the night, knowing that the world would never understand what it truly meant to lose someone piece by piece. But I understood. And I stayed. Because love, real love, doesn't disappear. Even when memory does. Winter came early that year, settling over Toronto in a way that made the world feel quieter. Slower, almost suspended. Elaine loved winter. She used to wake me up just to show me the first snowfall, pulling me toward the window like a child seeing magic. Now, she simply watched the flakes from the couch, eyes soft but distant, as if she recognized beauty without remembering why it made her heart warm once. Her decline was gradual but undeniable. Some days she called me by name. Some days she called me, the nice man who helps. And some days she didn't speak much at all, just sat quietly, holding a blanket against her chest as if grounding herself to something she couldn't name. I learned not to correct her, not to force clarity where confusion lived. I learned patience I didn't know I had. But more than anything, I learned to cherish the moments of recognition, brief sparks of the woman I loved flickering through the fog. One morning in late January, I woke up to find her sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the gray sky. "Rick," she whispered softly, "is Amanda coming home today?" I hesitated. She rarely brought up our daughter anymore. Her mind had blurred so many of those connections. "No, sweetheart," I said gently, "not today." "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice so fragile it made my chest ache. I pulled up a chair beside her, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and kissed the top of her head. "You didn't do anything wrong," I murmured. "Sometimes, things just happen. But you're safe, and I'm here." She nodded slowly, accepting that as truth, and it was the only truth that mattered. Amanda never wrote from prison. She never called. She wasn't allowed unless I approved her contact list. And I never did. I didn't hate her, I had moved past that. But I couldn't risk reopening wounds Elaine would relive again and again without remembering why they hurt. The months continued their slow march. Elaine's memories slipped further away. But her trust in me, whatever part of her mind held that, remained steady. She still reached for my hand when she was scared. She still leaned into my shoulder when watching television. She still smiled when I played her favorite old songs, even if she couldn't remember the lyrics. Love remained, even when memory didn't. In early spring, I received a letter stamped with the seal of the Superior Court of Justice. I recognized the style immediately: legal, formal, cold. The restitution update $175 owed. Interest accruing. Next review date in 6 months. Paper justice. The kind that looks impressive on a page but does nothing to change reality. I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer with all the others. Money would never fix what happened. It would never return the time we lost, the trust we lost, the moments Alzheimer's stole faster because of trauma. But I held the papers anyway, not for the money, but because accountability mattered, principle mattered, saying, "This was wrong," mattered. And so did survival. We adjusted. I took on part-time consulting work, something I never planned to do in retirement. The extra income helped cover Elaine's care. I sold my old truck. I let go of hobbies and routines. Every sacrifice was worth it if it meant Elaine could stay home with me longer. Her doctor told me gently that the time would come when she'd need memory care full-time. I nodded. I understood. But I wanted to stretch the timeline as far as I could without compromising her safety. I wanted to be the one she woke up to, the one she reached for, the one she trusted, even if she couldn't remember why. One night, much later, I found her awake in the living room, staring at the family photo on the wall, the one taken when Amanda was 5. Grinning with missing baby teeth. Elaine holding her close, both of them laughing at something I'd said. Elaine pointed at the picture, her brows knitting. That's my little girl," she whispered. "Yes," I said gently, "that's Amanda. She was lovely," she murmured, "sweet, kind." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Yes, she was." Elaine traced the air near the picture, not quite touching the glass. "What happened to her?" she asked. I closed my eyes for a moment. So many answers existed. None of them would help her. None of them would bring comfort. So I gave her the only answer that mattered. Life happened, I said softly, but we're okay. We're still together. She nodded slowly, resting her head on my shoulder. That's good, she whispered. As long as I have you. I'm not scared. My throat tightened. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She fell asleep on my shoulder, breathing softly, trusting me completely, just as she had trusted me on the day we married. The day Amanda was born. The day Alzheimer's first touched her mind. I carried her to bed and tucked her in, lingering beside her for a long moment. As I watched her sleep, I realized something that settled deep in my chest. Justice wasn't about making Amanda suffer. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment for its own sake. It was about protecting Elaine. Protecting her dignity. Protecting what remained of the life we built together. It was about drawing a line and saying, some things are unforgivable. Some things must have consequences. And love, true, steady love, will always rise quietly above the damage. I turned off the lamp and climbed into bed beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. And as the room grew still, I whispered the final truth of our story. We're still here, Elaine, still fighting, still together, and that's more than they ever wanted for us. That's the justice that matters.